Ito po sa bansa natin, sa Republika ng Pilipinas at sa mundo po, meron po tayong mga guesting po galing sa mga iba't ibang mga bansa sa kapaligiran po ng Pilipinas. And syempre ating mga kasama sa Cebu, sa media at sa civil society, sa advocacy po natin. Marami din pong lumalaganap ng mga sakit ngayon, kaya po si kasamang Almar ng SMNI will be monitoring from home. Si Ed Pancha ng Tuguegarao, we're waiting for him, but he met a motorcycle accident a few days ago. Pero sabi niya he'll be able to join us. Tess Padla sa Cagayan de Oro is also down with a flu or a cough. But Rico Osmeña in Cebu is with us. Cagayan de Oro will probably have Bombo Radio Lawrence. And so we'll see kung sino pa po ang mga kasama po sa ating mga regular galing sa mga probinsya na magiging mga reactors din po natin. Celso Kainglet in Iloilo is also ready to join us later on with some observations, reactions, and questions. At si Ginoong Danny Long, our regular moderator, is also absent. Nag-text po siya na meron siyang problemang hindi maiwasan itong araw na to. So we're going to start with me as moderator and first speaker. Alam po natin na ang usapang politika ang siyang lumalagana po ngayon sa ating national discourse, sa ating pambansang diskusyon. Pero nakakalimutan po ng marami at ng ating mga ibang malalaking media na pinakamahalaga pa rin po ang ekonomiya po natin. At ang isyung lumalagablab po sa mundo po natin ay itong trade war na nakikita po natin. Kaya po ang pamagat ng ating usap-usapan itong araw na to, talakayan, ay pamagat po sa English, Global Open Trade versus Predatory Economic Protectionism. May ilang mga paliwanag ang kailangan po tungkol sa predatory economic protectionism kasi po yung salitang economic protectionism ay sa mga nakaraang panahon ay magandang pakinggan dahil protectionism po, proteksyon sa ekonomiya ng isang bansa ay hindi naman po masama. Ang problema, pumasok na po dito ngayon sa bagong siglo ng mundo, itong predatory na protectionism na nakikita po natin sa Amerika. At kaya po ang global trading system na naging malaya po itong mga nakaraang dekada ay nagkakagulo ngayon at lahat ng bansa po ay apektado. At lalo-lalo na po yung mga bagong umuusbong na ekonomiya, the newly emerging economies po, ay malaking hamon po sa harap po nitong issue na to. Kaya po kinakailangan po natin pag-usapan at linawin kung anong makakabuti sa Pilipinas, yung global open trade or yung predatory economic protectionism na tila ay sinasang-ayunan ng kasalukuyang pamahalaan po ng ating Republika ng Pilipinas. At magsisimula po tayo sa pagpapakita po ng immediate effect po nitong predatory economic protectionism. Ang unang slide po natin ay nag-uulat mula sa business world po. Ang January balance of payments gap is in the Philippines, is the widest in 11 years, yung trade gap po. Ibig sabihin po, yung ating ine-export ay short or kulang sa ating ini-import. Mas malaki ang ating ini-import kaysa yung ating ine-export. So malaki ang ating ginagastos palabas ng mga dolyares natin kaysa yung kinikita po natin na dolyares galing sa exports po natin. At malaking economic impact po nito na negatibo po sa atin. So yan po ang hamon po. So umpusahan ko po yung ilang mga salita dito. The Philippines is in the grip of a trade crisis. In January 2025, it suffered the worst balance of payments deficit in 11 years. It stood at $4.1 billion in January, ballooning from a $740 million gap in January 2024. So, ang nilobo po ng ating deficit sa balance of payment ay higit $3 bilyong po. $3 bilyong. And a very big part of this is, of course, domestic problems sa ating ekonomiya, economic policy. But ang susunod na slide po, ating mapapakita po na may problema din ang Pilipinas sa mga patakaran na ating tinatawag na predatory economic protectionism na nagsisimula po sa Estados Unidos under Trump 2.0. Given the turbulent global environment created by the wildly gyrating early Trump 2.0 trade threats of sky-high tariffs left and right on friends and rivals alike, plus colonial-style occupation of neighboring territories, campaigns against the World Trade Organization and other free trade institutions, and reciprocal tariffs that will impact the Philippines directly, the Philippines must now give these trade issues comprehensive and deep thought, despite the mind-numbing political and electioneering noise in the Philippines today. So, kaunting paliwanag lang kung bakit natin tinatawag na predatory protectionism. Ating nabigyan na po ng kaunting hugis po yung ating salitang predatory kasi hindi lang po taripa, pati yung pagbabalik po ng kolonyalismo doon sa lugar ng Estados Unidos, yung banta na sasakupin ng Panama ulit, sasakupin ng Canada, ang Greenland, and so on. So that is why it is clearly very predatory. For many economic patriots and advocates of the economic system based on high tariffs to protect and promote basic industries without consideration of new factors in the 21st century world, the US President Donald Trump adheres to that old protectionist notion despite its outdated character. Why is it outdated? We quote this from an economic article. The intertwined facets of modern economy, economic complexity, and interdependence, unquote. Trump is beginning to discover this as other nations sanction the US also. So, ang susunod na slide po shows this, that even Americans are conscious of this. Trump's tariff and land grab threats signal US expansionist ambitions. To compensate for the limit to high tariff trade regime Trump advocates, he expands his protectionism with neocolonialism in his northern hemispheric backyard, threatening to land grab Canada, Panama, Greenland to wrest resources the US would be denied of when decoupling from the rest of the world. This is the predatory protectionism we tag here. It's the converse of the global open trade system which the BRICS nations espouse. Free Trade 1.0 or Globalization 1.0 was given a bad name by the impositions of the United States based on its neoliberal economics that demanded the rest of the world accept in exchange for trade with it and dollar loans, impositions of economic liberalization, deregulation, and privatization. Free trade based on the critical factor of fairness or fair trade as envisioned by the World Trade Organization PAC is essential. Despite those problems, the WTO and its rules helped expand world trade and lift many economies, as the next graph will show. So kahit paano, let's look at the graph. No? From 1950s to 2020, pataas din po ang global trade At marami pong naangat ng mga developing economies kahit may mga problema sa neoliberal policies po ng major trading country during this time, the United States of America. But now the US is sabotaging the global trading system. As we can see from the next graph, US goods trade balance to GDP, even the US is suffering from what is happening already. US trade deficit has persistently been growing since the mid-1990s up to the present, due primarily to the exorbitant privilege the US dollar enjoyed under the global financial system it dominated, which made importing cheaper than producing back home, easy investing in other countries to bring down costs, and easy money printing in times of crisis. And this has been coming home to roost in the United States. Instead of resolving the US financial issues, it blamed the problems all on other rising economies and the World Trade Organizations. So, sabi nga dito sa susunod na ulat, nakita ba natin yung napakita na kanina itong graph? Okay, and the next one. Amid Trump trade tensions, WTO remains crippled. Arbiter. WTO remains crippled arbiter. Next slide. Yeah. While US President Donald Trump unleashes trade wars and tariffs, the system for settling such disputes within the World Trade Organization has been paralyzed by whom? By the United States of America. Kasi po, Trump has been preventing the WTO from having its arbitration body by blocking the nominees to the arbitration body, kaya hindi mag-function po ang World Trade Organization. It has been blocking the appointment of the new chief for World Trade Organization, an African woman I will name a little later. So, because it is feeling that it is getting a raw deal when it is losing out, the United States is sabotaging the World Trade Organization, which has been beneficial for the rest of the world for the past decades. Basahin na natin. While previous American presidents before Trump also experimented with various tariff measures to remedy the US economic crisis, Trump 1.0 carried it to unprecedented heights, primarily against China. And Trump 2.0 expanded this to cover most countries around the globe, including its closest neighbors around the North American continent. As Trump unleashed the US trade war, it also turned to paralyzing the World Trade Organization, blocking the appointment of the World Trade Organization Chief Ngozi Iweala and nominees to the World Trade Organization appellate body that resolves trade disputes. But there is a new alternative, the new globalization and free trade, which is espoused and championed by China. As President Xi Jinping says in this next slide, no one will emerge as the winner in a trade war. So what is this new globalization and free trade? In 2017, President Xi Jinping of China, responding to Trump 1.0 trade war tariff, said, "It is true that economic globalization has created new problems, but this is no justification to write off economic globalization altogether. Rather, we should adapt to and guide globalization, cushion its negative impact, and deliver its benefits to all countries and all nations." Adding further, the global economy is the big ocean you cannot escape from. We should commit ourselves to growing an open global economy. No one will emerge as the winner in a trade war. The new globalization and free trade China forged did not impose neoliberal conditionalities. It coupled trade with the global development initiative following the infrastructure development of the Belt and Road Initiative, to boost the production and export capacities of developing nations and enrich the global trading milieu or world, while China, now the world's largest economy, opens up to more imports from the global south. It is overall a win-win for all nations engaged in the new globalization. Yan ang bagong globalization. Walang privatization, deregulation, liberalization. It is based on mutual respect of countries, on win-win benefits for all nations. The new globalization and free trade is an imperative for the Philippines. So the next slide shows anong benepisyo po ng open trade, walang mga taripa na naghahadlang. In December of 2024, the Philippines Center for Trade Expositions and Missions, CITEM, of the Department of Trade and Industry announced that the Philippines' participation in the 7th China International Import Expo, CIIE, held on November 10th of 2024 in Shanghai, gained 1.6 billion US dollar sales in the events there. On February 21, 2025, numerous Manila dailies headlined, quote, Philippines ships first frozen durian to China, unquote. This is a huge and growing market that China's new globalization and free trade for the Philippines exports. Okay. And of course, it's not only the Philippines benefiting from this, the other ASEAN countries are benefiting even more from the open trade and economic relations based on this new globalization of China. This is just one of the many, many reports from ASEAN of joint ventures which the Philippines is missing out in. In this report, Geely eyes electric vehicle foothold in Southeast Asia with a $10 billion Malaysian hub. Chinese automaker doubles down on Proton partnership, readies first deliveries. So, ganyan din po sa Indonesia. Indonesia is far better with a joint venture in processing of nickel for exports to China and the production of EV batteries for the EV car market of the world. Other Philippine products are also finding interest in China's growing middle class market of over 500 million people in 2024, or consumers with appetites for new products such as handmade crafts from the Philippines that first saw its appearance in the Chinese market at the 21st China ASEAN Exposition, Ka-Expo, in November 2024 at Nanning, China. The economic holy grail the Philippines can aspire for, as other ASEAN countries have established, are industrial joint ventures with the rising high-tech Chinese manufacturing such as in EVs, electric vehicles, solar panels, etc. So, what is the Philippines facing today? Philippine trade crisis with US tariffs, for example, this next slide. Moody's reports that US tariffs will hurt Philippine exporters and raise its costs. The Philippines is currently in a self-hurting economic distancing from the beneficent trade relations with the even wider opening of the China market and pivoting to America that is stepping up its predatory protectionism. Promoting the small yard high fence, the US is promoting the small yard high fence trade policy and the indiscriminate arbitrary impositions of tariffs on friends and foes alike. Henry Kissinger has famously said, to be an enemy of America is dangerous, to be a friend is fatal. And that goes for trade too. And for the Philippines, which is still placing its bet on the United States, we better wake up to the reality. For example, the Philippines has been for many, many years seeking a free trade agreement with the United States of America, such as the free trade agreements with China through the RCEP, Regional Comprehensive Economic Partnership, and so on in the region. But America, this is the next headline that is important for us to understand. Can we show it already? US rules out free trade deal with the Philippines. This is April 18, 2023. And these words were spoken by the US Trade Representative Catherine Tai herself. US Trade Representative Ambassador Catherine Tai says the Biden administration does not see traditional free trade agreement as appropriate this time as it pushes for Indo-Pacific economic framework. And Trump 2.0 is even more aggressive in its protectionism than Biden. So there is no hope to come from America for improving Philippine trade and economy. Aside from the threat of the new reciprocal tariffs the US now wants to impose on all its trading partners, the protectionist United States has repeatedly rejected the Philippines' request for a free trade agreement to provide the Philippines with preferential tariffs. Major Philippine exports to the US, consisting of office machine parts, integrated circuits, and insulated wires, may all be reshored back to the United States mainland soon. This trend also affects the Philippine fiscal sector, fiscal meaning government spending, as the US and allies contract official development aid while China withdraws due to Philippine decoupling from China. And the last slide we have will show this. Just on February 26, which is just 2 days ago, the headline from Business World says, Philippine hopeful US will continue to support the Luzon Economic Corridor. This is a project that was supposed to have started in 2022. It's been 3 years. It's now 2025. Nothing has happened because the inset I provided there from the Eurasian Times reported just on the same day, February 26, China's withdrawal puts Philippines' 850 million freight railway project in a limbo. And of course, the Philippines is eyeing US-Japanese lenders, which are two countries that are in financial crisis today. So 3 years delayed na, and we don't see it happening in the next 3 years. This is what is happening to the Philippine economic development plans, the delays, postponements, cancellations of many of these projects because of Bongbong Marcos's decoupling from China under pressure from the United States of America. It's about time that our nation discuss this and change course, unless we willingly invite the doom, the economic doom that is coming from this blind policy of the Bongbong Marcos administration. One of our reactors, Rico Osmeña of Cebu, just texted us that he has a news coverage at 10:30. So we will open discussions earlier for our reactors to introduce or contribute their reactions and maybe ask questions. So after me, let's open for maybe 5-10 minutes for some questions or reactions from Celso Cainglet from the group in Cagayan de Oro. Test pa. No. Can you raise your hands? Tess Padla from Cagayan de Oro is asking that we send her the link. I think I tried to send. Let's try to send again. Let me look for it for a while. I'll send it through my cell phone. So anyway, anybody from Rico? Yes. Good morning, Rico.
Yes,
Can we see your handsome face?
yeah.
You know, Rico?
Well, you know that Cebu is is a hub of trade also. culture and innovation. And I would just like to get your reaction, comment on, especially that we also have an export processing zone here, which I think is right now having crisis also. The Mactan Economic Zone and even in Balamban. We have trade. Of course, the implication here is our exporters would have a hard time right now in terms of tariff sa US, no? Because one of our trade partners is the United States. Can I get your reaction on this? How can we deal with it at this point?
Can you repeat just in one sentence the question again?
How can we deal with it that Cebu, being a trade hub, is also exporting, no, goods in the United States, since the United States is going to implement higher tariffs. So how would how would Cebu? What can Cebu do?
Yes, now I understand the question. Well, the challenge is growing because this reciprocal tariff has been announced by the United States of America. And as the Moody's report states, it will be even more challenging for Philippine exporters because the Philippines has been imposing higher tariffs than other countries for its imports from other countries such as the United States. So the United States plan in this reciprocal tariff is to match every or equalize or match the import tariffs or import taxes of the importing countries like the Philippines. No? So it's a matter really that we with Cebu should be studying closely and monitoring and exerting our pressure on the government to negotiate and minimize the impact. That is why we are conducting this symposium today and media forum. So thank you for your. I don't know, maybe we should do a seminar in Cebu on these matters. Kasamang Rico.
I think we have an organization, especially the Mactan Economic Zone exporters. Hopefully we can, because in Cebu right now, our main export products, I think for the fact that one is furniture, and then our dried mango, steel scrap, dried raw seaweed, fresh bananas, electronics, industrial goods, fashion accessories, shellcraft. These are or garments. So these are basically some of this goes to America. So with the implication of a high tariff in America, so our goods here will be affected, especially that there are some companies already in Mactan Economic Zone that are pulling out and transferring to Vietnam. It's because of the implications like they have to retrench workers because of this export problem right now, even not only in America, and I think even in other countries. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Kasamang Rico from Cebu. Any other comments, reactions from our audience? Have we sent the link to Cagayan de Oro already, Tespadla? Okay. Can we flash? There's a request that we flash our ACP logo. We're still looking for it. Okay. So, any other hands raised? Can you check? Okay, there being none at this time, we can move on to the presentation of Ado Paglinawan. Ado, go ahead.
Today I will do things a little differently. Instead of expressing my own analysis.
Well, may question ba from, you have a question? Did you send it here? I'm checking now. What role does China's economic strategy play in shaping global trade policies? Well, right now there's a very intense debate between the United States of America and China's trade perspective, and so the rest of the world, the global majority, should help resolve this. And that is why we have this session today, a symposium and media forum. How do trade wars and tariffs impact international relations? Well, all world wars in the past, First World War, Second World War, began as trade wars. And this is the challenge today. We might be facing the Third World War if these trade issues are not resolved amicably and productively. We can see already that really behind the Ukraine war is really a trade war between the West and the East, Russia. The economic issues underlying the motive of the West, the collective West, to put pressure on Russia, to put sanctions on Russia, to move Ukraine closer to NATO, to move in missiles to Ukraine, threatening Russia, was the strategic goal of regime change in Russia, pressuring Russia to into a regime change situation, eventually breaking apart Russia and taking over the huge natural assets, which today is coming also to the fore with President Trump's offer of a joint venture to Putin on the minerals riches of Ukraine, which Russia has already occupied in the eastern regions of Ukraine, as well as the vast riches, natural resources riches of Russia in the motherland. So that's really the strategic impetus from the collective West on its centuries-old pressure on Russia from the time of Napoleon to the German Second World War, Germany, and so this can only be resolved through, as now proposed by President Trump, engagement with Russia in jointly exploiting resources in Ukraine and the resources of Russia, which Putin apparently has an open attitude to, open-mindedness to. The next question is, economic nationalism a viable long-term strategy in an interconnected world? Where economic nationalism has to adjust to the realities of the world and trading world today. America built itself on what it called the American system of economics, the Hamiltonian economics, which I think Valdes, our last speaker and special guest, will be expounding on later on. It is the same economic paradigm that Marcos Sr. tried to exercise in the Philippines during his term, but which was frustrated by American regime change operation in the EDSA 1 revolution, so-called. Economic nationalism should understand the new realities, the complexities of the modern global economic system, and adapt to it, which includes the acceptance of complementarity in this new economic environment of the modern world. And that is why this open global trading system, as proposed by BRICS, of course, behind this is China's economic plan that includes not just trading, not just exporting, but opening to imports. At the same time, engaging all countries that need development with the Belt and Road Initiative, development, infrastructure development, telecommunication, electric power, cheap electric power, roads, bridges, to facilitate open trade. Okay, it seems our Another question here, hand raised by Celso Kainglet from Iloilo City. Celso, go ahead.
Morning, Kamento, Kaado, and friends. I used to enjoy watching the senile antics of Joe Biden, but now I'm enjoying this bravado of Trump. However, upon further thought, this is not really amusing. This is very dangerous because it will boomerang, it will backfire to the American people, especially this tariff. It will raise the domestic prices. Now, is Trump in denial or is Trump not aware? I think he is. But why is he pushing this? I agree with you, Kamento, because this danger that Trump is doing, because the United States still has a formidable armed forces and still could inflict damage, is symptomatic of the decline of the American empire. Professor Jeffrey Sachs of Harvard and Richard Wolff of the University of Massachusetts observed the same, that this tantrum of Trump is very symptomatic of America's decline. However, indeed, there's a very huge possibility of war. Even Colonel Douglas MacGregor said that. And maybe this is what they're pushing really, because many of the deep states are also members of the military-industrial complex. And we know very well that American economy thrives in arms sale, in war. So I believe this is very dangerous. So the Philippines has to decouple itself from this policy, because we will go down with the United States. Thank you, Kamento.
Thank you very much, Celso. Any reactions from anyone or from the audience also? Okay. Well, anyway, we have until 10:30 with Rico Osmeña, and I think again De Oro is trying to enter our room. So Ed Pancha in Tuguegarao is already present there in on our screen. So we'll continue with Kaado Paglinawan. Kaado?
Okay, today I will do things a little differently. Instead of expressing my own analysis, I will report on somebody else's story. The title of my paper is Multipolarity: Constructing the Environment for World Trade, Peace, and Prosperity. Last week, an American economist and public policy analyst, who is also a professor at the Columbia University, gave an unconventional address to the Parliament of the European Union. The next day, the headlines screamed, Jeffrey Sachs' explosive address at the EU Parliament sends shockwaves across Europe, and if I may add, across the world. His thoughts, expressed in 90 minutes, I believe provided the strategic environment for our topic today. And so let me take up some points. What I would like to do is widen the point of departure para doon sa mga hindi makahulagpos nung at makapaglagay ng handle sa masyadong technical natin topic today, ay ma-locate nila kung saan tayo nanggagaling. First, on the matter of stretching the Cold War after it ended in 1991. Sachs said, the NATO enlargement, as you know, started in 1999 with Hungary, Poland, and the Czech Republic. Russia protested, but of course to no avail. Then George Bush Jr. came in when the 9/11 occurred, and the US decided on September 20, 2001, that it would launch 7 wars in 5 years. You can listen to General Wesley Clark's online talk about that. Second, on the matter of what proceeded from that construct, the economic expert added, Viktor Yanukovych was elected in 2010 in Ukraine on the platform of neutrality. Russia had no territorial interest or designs in Ukraine at all. What Russia was negotiating was a 25-year lease to 2042 for a naval base. That's it. The idea that Putin is rebuilding the Russian Empire is childish propaganda. We move next to the elephant in the room. The Economist said the United States decided this man must be overthrown. It's called regime change operation. There has been about 100 of them carried out by the US. That's what the CIA does for a living. Okay, please know it's a very unusual kind of foreign policy. But in America, if you don't like the other side, you don't negotiate with them. You try to overthrow them, preferably covertly. And if it doesn't work covertly, you do it overtly. That's the only foreign policy explanation the American people are given anywhere. Fourth, woe to those who adopted the unipolar logic. Such continued. I am not anti-Ukraine. I am pro-Ukraine completely. I have a track record with the Ukrainians. I advised the Ukrainians. I beg the Ukrainians, save your lives, save your sovereignty, save your territory, be neutral, don't listen to the Americans. I repeated to them the famous adage that Kamento mentioned earlier of Henry Kissinger, that to be an enemy of the United States is dangerous, but to be a friend is fatal. So he echoed this to the European Parliament. Okay, let me repeat. To be an enemy of the United States is dangerous. To be a friend is fatal. President Trump does not want a losing hand. This is why it is more likely than not. This war will end because Trump and Putin will agree to end the war. If Europe does all its great warmongering, it doesn't matter. The war is ending to get it out of your system. Ukraine is a loser. The one that will be saved by the negotiations taking place right now is Ukraine and second, Europe. Ladies and gentlemen, the world is entering an era of heightened tensions and uncertainty as it shifts from the US-led unipolarity towards multipolarity. The Munich Security Report of 2025 notes that while the future remains unclear, as Trump himself is shifting from Trump 1 and from the weaponization policies of Biden to Trump 2, whether dominated by US-China rivalry or evolving into a broader system, the process of multipolarization continues to gain momentum. According to the authors of that report, multipolarization is not only evident in the growing influence of emerging powers, but also in the widening ideological divides. As Katipunan said, as liberal values lose their dominance both within the nations and across the global system. The report further states, political and economic liberalism, which changed the unipolar post-Cold War period, is no longer the only game in town. It is increasingly contested from within, as demonstrated by the rise of nationalist populism in many liberal democracies. But of course, the United States, it's still trying to keep as much as possible its unipolar public. The report also suggests that Donald Trump's return to the White House could, repeat, could, conditional, accelerate this shift, signaling the possible end of Pax Americana. It notes that Trump's views the current international order, or what is commonly touted as rule-based order, as unfavorable and would likely prioritize US interests and China containment while potentially straining relationship with allies. That the new American president has seen the light in multipolarity is no longer a signal. In his first personal meeting with the European counterparts 2 weeks ago, Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth has ruled out a NATO membership of Ukraine. He also said it is unrealistic to aim for a return to Ukraine's borders as they were before 2014, when Russia annexed Crimea and supported separatists who took over swaths of eastern Ukraine. This appears to be a fait accompli, as Putin said 3 days ago that he is open to offering the US access to rare minerals, including from Russian-occupied Ukraine. Further, Hegseth expects the US to assume only the oversight role as Trump administration works to shift responsibility for the Ukrainians and European security to NATO and the European Union. So, SAC advises Europe, don't go to Kiev, go to Moscow, discuss with your counterparts. You're Europe, you're 450 million people, you're a 20 trillion economy. You should be the main economic trading partner of Russia. It's natural, by the way. Europe has to open negotiations directly with Russia as well, because the United States will quickly lose interest. And you're going to be living with Russia for the next thousands of years. Russia is not going to invade Europe. This is the fundamental point. It may go up to the Dnieper River, but it's not going to invade Europe. Of course, there are real issues. The main issue for Russia as a major force in the largest nuclear power in the world has been US unipolarity from the very beginning. Now that is seemingly waning. Let me just say with respect to Russia, says Jeffrey Sachs, with respect to China rather, China is not an enemy. China is just a success story. That's why it is viewed by the United States as an enemy, because China is a bigger economy than the United States. So that moves from tripolarity to multipolarity. You know, when the world talks about great powers right now, they talk about US, Russia, China, and I would like to add India. And I would really like to include Europe and Africa as an African Union. In my understanding, what has befallen Europe, not only in Ukraine crisis, but Serbia in 1999, the wars in the Middle East, including Iraq, Syria, the wars in Africa, including Sudan, Somalia, Libya, these are wars that the United States led and cost for more than 30 years now, to be precise. Europe has paid a heavy price for this because Europe has not had a foreign policy during this period that I can figure out. No voice, no unity, no clarity, no European interest, only American loyalty. I issue 2 reports each year, and one is on the World Happiness Report, and 18 of the top 20 countries are European. This is the highest quality of life in the whole world. So you need your own policy to protect the quality of life the United States weighs way down. The other is the annual Sustainable Development Report, and almost the top countries are European, except in geopolitics. So you need your own foreign policy, not for 27 of you, but for the whole Europe. But you cannot have that unless you have your own security structure. Sachs was, of course, referring not to NATO, but to the Organization for Security and Cooperation in Europe, OSCE. Europe lost its voice in 2008 when the US thought of enlarging its unipolarity through NATO from Brussels all the way to the Pacific, Vladivostok, step by step. Thereupon, Sachs said, any place without a US base in the world is an enemy. Neutrality is a dirty word in the US lexicon. If you are neutral, you will be subversive. Finlandization landed Finland #1 in the happiness report year after year. Rich, successful, happy, and secure. But that's pre-NATO, when Sweden, Finland, and Austria were neutral. Smart. When Ukraine was neutral. Smart. If two superpowers, keep them apart a little bit, especially when the US is pushing its nose into the other one. Could someone in NATO please stop talking about more war? And could NATO stop talking for Europe? And Europe stop thinking it's NATO? This is the first absolute point. There has to be a structure where Europe can speak as Europe and as one, and even with some dissent. It can't be by unanimity. You can do a lot better if you negotiate directly. And he makes his second point. Your diplomats should be diplomats, not secretaries of war. A diplomat is a special kind of talent. A diplomat is trained to sit together with others, sign, to listen, to shake hands, to smile, to be pleasant. It's very hard and it's a skill. Training. It's a profession. It's not a game. You need that kind of diplomacy. That means going to Moscow, inviting your Russian counterpart to Europe, discussing. And if I may add, talking to the Chinese and ASEAN as well. Sachs continues. I want Europe, for instance, to have diplomacy with ASEAN and spend a lot of time with ASEAN countries. I told ASEAN many years ago, make a Green Deal and talk to the Europeans so that you have this wonderful relationship in trade, investment, and technology. Last year, ASEAN announced a Green Deal. What did Europe do about it? Nothing. It said, sorry, we are in the Ukraine war. Thank you. The prospects are very positive if we construct the peace. This is basic. And if we want to avoid conflict, Jeffrey Sachs concludes. Ladies and gentlemen, as part of ASEAN, let me bring it home to the Philippines. It is pathetic that as the world goes north to multipolarity, our leaders have chosen to go south to unipolarity. Our ambassador to Washington, from Valdes, was beating his chest that he was able to negotiate that the US unfreeze $336 million of military aid to the Philippines. There is no need to boast for a pea-brain ambassador as Babes Romualdez. That aid was supposed to be $500 billion. So it has been chopped by $164 million before it was $500 before Trump assumed office. Loss number 2, that assistance will be in kind. No cash will enter the Philippines. The money will remain in the US, lining the pockets of some arms contractor in Washington, D.C. Loss number 3, it is not a grant, but a foreign military credit. In short, lend-lease basis increasing our foreign debt. Albeit soft, it is also not interest-free. I would like to say, especially in the presence of media and bloggers here, that the 336 billion seems to coincide with the cost of the Typhon weapons system. I hope not, because the system is only for launching and guiding missiles, prominently Tomahawk subsonics, that cost from 3 million per stick. Hindi pa po kasama yung mga missiles doon. Anong gagamitin nyo? May tinador kayo, wala kayong bato. Some locals seem to be therefore, no? Parang tinanggal yung cover to sa vinyl. And what do I see? That some locals seem to be after a pact commission. The story of Europe and Ukraine under a unipolar setting, as predicted by Jeffrey Sachs, should serve as an admonition to President Bongbong Marcos to return to the independent foreign policy of his predecessor, start mending fences with China and Russia, reaffirm ASEAN of our treaties with them on neutrality and non-nuclearization, and start development diplomacy initiative with Europe, India, and Africa. This is where we are in the cellar of diplomacy at this point, and I accuse our Foreign Affairs Secretary of not being in the league of Jeffrey Sachs. You are way down as spokesperson, as proxy for the Americans, especially with your statements in the Munich Security Conference that was so humiliating for the country. Our gross domestic product, high at 5.6 last year, is illusory. Sucking up to the Americans for the past 32 months has sunk our purchasing power parity as incomes fell short of containing inflation, sending 63 of our people to perceive themselves as poor, the highest in 20 years. As we speak, we are on a rice emergency, as obviously we have no food security from within, which should have been the government's first priority, rather than inventing a mythical West Philippine Sea to fish for false flag with China, proxying for US zero-sum and obsolete unipolar interests. My friends, the bus of opportunities has long left the station. Jeffrey Sachs' wake-up call to Europe very much applies to us. Spot on. Thank you very much.
Okay, maybe we will pause a while for some questions. At the same time, I want to take this opportunity to segue into just a very short presentation before we go to our special guest, Itos Valdes. But I just want to read a message from Almar of SMNI, who is monitoring because he's down with some flu. Sabi niya, Sir, hingi po ako ng copy ng recorded video sa Zoom kasi off-sync po ang nasa live. We've been trying to fix our Wi-Fi connection with PLDT, but it's been months that they have not been able to perfect it. And of course, I think this is a problem of many consumers with this oligarch-owned communication connections. So Ka Joshua, the recording will be better for them to review and to write reports on. Okay, I'm going to segue briefly before I go to Carlos Valdes, Mr. Carlos Valdes of the KDP, because this is relevant to the security aspect that of trade that Ka-Ado has just presented, the multipolar environment. But this concerns a raging issue today in the Philippines, the Typhon missile system. It has been on the front pages for the past 2 weeks at least, and this is also in connection. This is relevant to our discussion of trade because, as you can see, it is already interfering with our efforts to try to focus on trade and the economic development and recovery. And we can see very clearly that the Americans are preparing the same fate that Ukraine now faces, but this time for the Philippines after the initial uh, play of Trump 2.0. He has promised to focus on Asia. Although there are many confusing statements from him, like the latest is that he has no interest in focusing on Taiwan right now. But we cannot say because on the other side of the picture, the French aircraft carrier Charles de Gaulle has just been in the Philippines exercising naval drills and aerial drills with the Philippine forces. But at the center of this controversy now is the Typhon missile system, and I want to read the position paper of the Asian Century Philippines Strategic Studies on this matter. The title is Typhon Missile System Must Be Expelled. The Philippines faces an existential threat from the installation of the US Typhon missiles launching system capable of firing nuke-capable long-range Tomahawk missiles that can reach Russia, North Korea, and China. To make matters worse, the Typhon missile launch systems are being moved around in the Philippines by the United States to make them harder to detect by countries in the neighborhood that perceive themselves as targets of a US deep state proxy war in the same manner Ukraine has been. China has since mid-2024 persistently called out the US Typhoon missile system installation in the Philippines as a destabilizing factor in an otherwise peaceful, tranquil, and stable region, enjoying fabulous economic growth and development. China has described the missile launchers as, quote, and unquote, provocative and dangerous move in coordination with external forces, with emphasis on the external forces, meaning they politely omit the name, but of course that's the United States of America and the collective West. And very recently called on the Philippines to withdraw the missile system from the region. While China has been very patient with the Philippines, its Ministry of Foreign Affairs spokesman has said, quote and unquote, our message to the Philippines, China will not sit on its hands when its security interests are in danger or under threat. The Philippines will be hurting its own interests if it keeps refusing to change course, unquote. The Asian Century Philippines Strategic Studies Institute advises the Philippine government to take heed and seriously act to reverse course and accept the repeated offer of China, extended through its diplomatic representation in the Philippines, Ambassador Huang Xilian, to meet China halfway, quote unquote, on the matters of serious concern between the two countries. China has exercised tremendous forbearance with the Philippines' collaboration with the US deep state elements, seeking to foment and exacerbate tensions in the region and continue the China, quote, containment strategy, unquote. The Philippines must reconcile with China, regain all the economic benefits of engagement with China's monumental economic expansion, secure the Filipino people's economic future, or face the disastrous consequence of being a victim of a US proxy war like Ukraine. The 2,500-kilometer range of Tomahawk missiles can reach as far as the Russian territories, and certainly China and North Korea much nearer. In July of 2024, international media reports President Putin of Russia warning that the Typhon missile installation puts the Philippines in its crosshairs. This Typhon missile launcher is no longer a defensive installation as argued by Philippine defense officials. They are perceived by near and far neighbors of the Philippines as imminent threats, as targets of the US deep state proxy plans. As part of the U.S. containment strategy of China, the evident target of the U.S. deployment of the Typhon missile system is the fast-rising and peaceful People's Republic of China, which has overtaken the United States as the largest economy in the world and leading in AI and defense technologies. President Trump may be holding out the olive branch to President Xi Jinping by inviting Chinese electric vehicle car factories to the US to employ American workers, but the US deep state and Filipino proxies are clearly accelerating the provocations. The Asian Century Philippine Strategic Studies Institute also advises the Bongbong Marcos administration to heed the polite counsel of ASEAN leaders such as former Singapore Prime Minister Lee Hsien Loong, asking if the Philippines would like to be the battleground between the US and China. Or Malaysian Prime Minister Anwar Ibrahim's advice that, quote, US military presence in our view should be avoided because they would then provoke and escalate tension, unquote. The message is clear. For the sake of the Philippines, the US military bases and troops must also exit with the Typhon missile system. So before now, we go to Carlos Valdes of the KDP.
Can I just say?
Yeah, we can add open question.
Yeah. Alam po ninyo, ang pinaka nininervous dito hindi China because China, North Korea, and Russia have a way of deterring this weapon and neutralizing it. Ang pinaka nakakabahan po dito as evidenced by the statement of Anwar Ibrahim is our ASEAN neighbors. Because clearly the US has discovered by accident that they will be able to blackmail ASEAN countries if this Typhon missile system is in the Philippines. Kasi abot ito sa Indonesia, sa Singapore, sa Brunei, sa Malaysia on the south. At on the west, sa Laos, Cambodia, Vietnam, Thailand, and Myanmar. So huwag na tayong maglokohan dito, Mr. President. Ano ba naman? All China has to do, sabi mo sa dyaryo kahapon, is to give way to our demands. Ano bang demands mo? That are even thought of. Anong demands mo? You want China to recognize our exclusive economic zones when it overlaps with their own sovereignty? And number two, when you refuse bilateral negotiations, are you kidding us? Anong klaseng utak ang tumatakbo dyan? Ha? Ano gusto mong pagbigyan ng China? Ano ba hinihingi mo sa China? Binoykot mo nga yung 23 billion US dollars na economic assistance Dahil hinandbrake ka ng Amerikano, ayaw magpapasok ng miskinanong Chinese trade, tourism, and investment here. Our tourism has dropped from 4 million in 3 years to only less than 700,000 in 2 years. So halata strategy mo. And by the way, the only reason why you seem to be able to hide your Typhon missile system is because hindi inilalabas sa belly ng C-17. So alam ng China that when there is a C-17 in the Philippines and they know that from their own satellites, nandun yung Typhon missile system. Okay? So, what leverage are you using? This is lunacy. Huh? This is lunacy. At saka bistado ka na. Sinecure mo yung 336 million para bilhin yan. Kasi sabi ni Gebotio Doro, we will acquire it. So between you and Gebotio Doro, kami nung binira ng Betray, sino kikita sa inyo? O, diretsahan tanungan na yan. Magkano kikitain ni Dave Sumualdes dyan? Ako na yung nagtatanong lang. Yung gimmick nyo, buko na. So ibalik nyo na yan dahil it's not doing anything. No self-respecting investor will come into the country when the missiles of China, North Korea, and Russia has already put us in these crosshairs because of your derailment
Okay.
and your enthusiasm over this thing, the Typhon missile system, that will take $3 million pa bago mo almahin ng missile. Saan ka kukuha ng $3 million? That's 150 million pesos per stick. Why you got that?
Okay, let's check if we have hands raised dito sa ating audience while we wait for the hands to be raised. Any other comments? Any questions from the audience here? Okay, may naka-raise ba ng hand? There being none. Yeah, meron ba?
Osman Muhammad.
Osman Zin. Hindi, ano lang yan? Raise, ano ba yan? Ka Joshua? Question ba yan?
Celso, yes.
Hindi.
Celso.
Celso, okay. Celso Kainglet from Iloilo City. Celso, go ahead.
Alam mo, Kado, you're very correct. I agree with you. But I really have my doubt if the present government will heed our advice. What would it take for the Filipino people to wake up from this clear and present danger? No? So frustrating. Ano kayang magandang gawin natin? Of course, this forum is one, no? So how do we reach out? How do we propagate? No? Thank you, Kado.
Is that a question? I missed that.
Yes.
Just a statement, okay.
Celso,
My question is, what would it take for the Filipino people to wake up, and how much more we can do? I said this forum is already one step. No? Sa Sulo ng Filipino, which is very massage every Saturday, is doing an excellent job. I hope we can do more.
Yeah, well, right now, our effort is to inform the people to overcome the giant great wall of disinformation that the mainstream media, consisting of ANC, Inquirer, Philippine Star, TV5, and all that, the great wall of disinformation that they're presenting to the government, to the people, as well as the government, key government officials, of course, like Ibo Chodoro. Questions such as what right does China have to interfere with Philippine security defense policies? Well, like the question of Russia, that is the question of China. When the red line is crossed and threatens their security, yung po ay may pakialam na sila. And that is what Bongbong Marcos and Gibo Chodoro brought to the Philippines. Before their shenanigans here, itong pinagagawa po nila Bongbong at nila Gibo Chodoro with the Americans bringing in this Typhon missile, wala pong malaking issue galing sa China or sa Russia. Nung dumating po itong mga Typhon missile launchers nung Abril, agad-agad sa Hunyo or Hulyo ba yung kaaking inulat kanina, nagsalita na si President Putin na ito'y nalalagay sa crosshair ng targets ng Russia, because it has converted the Philippines into a satellite state of the United States of America. So kung ang mga ibang mga bahagi po ng ating masang Pilipino ay nalilinlang, nagugoyo, na loloko dito sa mga statements like Gibo Chodoro's, what right does China have to interfere with our defense and the security policies, ano? tayo ay nandito upang ipaliwanag po yan. That is why we're reaching out to the provinces because we have to go around the other mainstream media. Lalampasan na po natin ang Inquirer, TV5 at lahat yung mga yan. At tayo direktang doon sa mga probinsya na po tayo magpapaliwanag po. And dito sa Metro Manila ay ating papasukan ng mas maraming AM radio para maabot po natin ang masang Pilipino. Any questions from the audience? Ed Pancha from Tuguegarao City, raise his hand. Good morning, kasamang Ed. How are you first? How are you now doing? We're recovering from your motorcycle accident.
Come in.
You're muted.
Makamute ka. Ayan.
Okay.
So I'm fine, no? Galing na tayo sa aksidente. But anyway, kaugnay nga ng pinag-uusapan tungkol sa ano ba yung posibleng magiging epekto sa particularly sa aming lalawigan dito po sa Cagayan. Nung yung EDCA site, tutuloy ko lang yung usapin sa EDCA sites, no? Because ang Cagayan ay isa po kasi ito sa nakikita ng mga Chinese investors na malaking kumbaga malaking partner nila sa ekonomiya, no? Especially sa economic development ng aming lalawigan. And nababahala nga lang kami na dahil nga sa pagkakaroon ng EDCA sites mismo doon sa loob ng economic zone namin dito, Cagayan Special Economic Zone and Freeport, dahil nandun mismo yung kampo kung saan nga nakalagay yung EDCA site. And then meron pa sa inilagay na isa pang EDCA site sa Lalo International Airport dito po sa lalawigan ng Cagayan. Na alam naman natin na kapag international airport, economic zone ang pinag-uusapan, ito yung tinatarget talaga ng sa mga infrastructure development, no? Because kaya ko lang nababanggit ito na baka ito yung posibleng naging dahilan kaya naging matamlay tuloy yung mga dating Chinese investors na pumunta sa Cagayan, no? Umikot at nakita nila ang lalawigan as prospective investment hub, no? Ang daming mga Chinese investors na dumalaw dito. Nagkaroon sila ng tour, no, sa economic and industrial zones. At marami nga silang napili dito, marami silang nakita na posibleng magiging development area. Kabilang na dito yung international airport sa tri-boundary ng Tuaw, Piat, and Solana, no? And then ilan pa ho dyan ay yung long-term development plans ng probinsya, katulad nga ng Cagayan Smart City with Disneyland, International Seaport, yung Heavy Industrial Park at Cagayan Railway project, no? Na ito po yung naipresenta na naging interesado sila. And ang mismong pumunta pa rito ay yung mismong presidente, no, ng Commerce Chamber of Zhejiang, China, with at least 1,000 members na mga Chinese investors. At ito nga yung nakikita namin na akala namin ay pag-usbong na ng probinsya ng Cagayan sa pamamagitan nga ng tinawag ng provincial government na Cagayan International Gateway Project. Chinese talaga yung unang nagpakita ng interest. But sabi ko nga, medyo tumamlay yung interest nila nung nagkaroon nga ng paglalagay dito ng EDCA sites, no? Dalawa sa economic zone, sa loob ng economic zone, and then doon mismo sa sa international airport, no? And ang dami ring mga rito. Pati doon sa economic zone mismo, may mga nung time ni Attorney Lambino bilang CESA President and Chief Executive Officer ay marami siyang pinasukan na mga memorandum of understandings, letter of intents, no? If I'm not mistaken, 7 memorandum of agreements and 2 letter of intent with Chinese companies na tumutukoy dun sa mga proyekto na mostly for infra in Santa Ana to propel yung development nga ng Cagayan Special Economic Zone and Freeport. Pero the fact na nandoon yung EDCA site, I doubt kung ano na magiging mangyari dito, no? So, ito yung pinangangamba namin na napakarami po ng mga mga nakikita ng mga Chinese investors na pwedeng palaguin dito. But with what is happening, ito yung kinababahala ng mga kagaya, no, na baka magkaroon sila ng disinterest after po ng paglalagay ng EDCA sites dito po sa aming lalawigan. Yun lang po yung nakikita ko na medyo matinding problema namin with this EDCA sites, Kaado, Kamentong, and the rest. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ginoong Edmund Pancha ng Tuguegarao at broadcaster po sa Tuguegarao. I don't know if the other colleagues in the media joined us today, but we welcome everybody there. Your message is very, very important po, and magandang marinig po ng buong mundo kasi we have people from the international community tuned in right now, no? At sa ating national audience, importante po yan. Yung mga daing po ninyo tungkol dyan sa naantalang economic development dahil po sa maling foreign policy po ng ating bansa. And of course, ang susunod na tanong dyan ano naman ang naihahatid na benepisyo nitong mga EDCA bases dyan? Dalawa ata dyan sa Cagayan province, dalawa. Meron ba talagang economic benefit? Meron bang tulong pag may disaster events? So far, the feedback we always get is there is nothing much to gain from these bases, di ba? Anyway, Kaado, you have any thing to add?
Yes, we turn our backs on the very lucrative, given our needs and even given our budget. We turn our back to a very lucrative development assistance package that Xi Jinping offered us, which is $23 billion US. And that's about 1.5 trillion. That's already the deficit, the budget deficit of this country. Ang laki-laki. And then what did we exchange it for? For 500,000 $500 million from Biden and now trimmed to 336 by Trump, and we are celebrating. USA, National Endowment for Democracy, America Competes Act, all of these are being targeted by Elon Musk and are facing reduction. So we are facing another 500 million reduction in inflows from the United States. And our trade will soon be subject to the boomerang of the tariff war going on. And then our budget pa, internal budget. Although somebody said that 2/3 of it have already been withdrawn by the Marcos government, this 2025 budget might be even reenacted to 2024 budget, which will mean a loss of 600 billion in appropriation. So yung sinasabi ni Bongbong Marcos na ang intensyon ng oposisyon in bringing all this judicial action against the budget is a shutdown, is pure hogwash. It is his policies, it is his cabinet, I think most of the people in his cabinet want to jump ship already because, like Cesar Chavez, they don't see any future inside there because but makapal ang internal intrigues and politics kaya sa producing one single project. And all this, look what diesel, for instance, of the Department of Transportation has inherited. Tigil yung Calamba to Albay ng China. Tigil yung Mindanao Railroad System ng China. Tigil yung Subic to Clark ng China. What? And they're blaming the Chinese? because of the wrong math about interest rates when ang kanilang intention was to rebid it so that kumita na naman sila sa korupsyon. Approve na ng NEDA, approve na ng China yung loan, sisimula na lang yung project, o ano ngayon ang nangyari? May nakikita ba kayong train ngayon dyan na nagtatravel to Tuban, for instance, to Calamba? All of these things are facing a shutdown. And it is not because of the opposition. It is not because of the Dutertes. It is because of the gross mismanagement, incompetence, and corruption of this government. And then look, even, never mind. I will just go on and on.
Yeah.
Comment.
Okay. Well, it's almost 10:30, 2 minutes to 10:30. I think it's time for our guest, Carlos Valdes, to join us and present his paper on the global open trade versus predatory economic protectionism. Is Itos Valdes ready? Yeah, there you are. Good morning, our youngest and
Youngest. Good morning, Kamentong and Kaado, old and good friends of my father, and to everybody here. Greetings to everybody in this very important and very timely forum on the and thank you to Asian Century Philippines for Strategic Studies for sponsoring this. Good evening po sa inyong lahat.
go ahead, please, Itos.
Okay, so I would just like to, given the topic at hand, maybe provide our a context to our position on this as the Katipunan Demokratikong Pilipino. And for those who know my father and who know all of us here at the KDP and the whole history of our fight for Philippine independence, real Philippine independence, you will be familiar with this. But to those who don't, I will give a quick contextual background as to our principles regarding this. So I would just like to say protectionism itself, our position is that it is not bad, and in fact, it is essential for any nation that wants to develop. Its roots can be found in the 1648 Treaty of Westphalia, wherein the number one principle, just a quick context, no, of course, everybody can research this online, no, but the quick article of that, the quick principle behind that is the betterment of each other. What is the benefit to another nation? The context of that is that this ended the 100 Years' War in Europe. Alam po natin sa Europe, at the time, wala pong republic, walang nation state, puro colonial powers, puro empire po. And each empire at the time was engaged, as empires do, in beggaring thy neighbor, to quote Mahathir. Sabi niya, kailangan manalo, patayin natin yung ating neighbor. So the concept of Westphalia is making your neighbor prosperous, which is again another quote of Mahathir. So sabi niya, let us. This is not going to work because it will be a battle of attrition down to patayin na lang lahat hanggang ubusan yung ating lahi. And this is what's happening right now. So sabi ng led by Cardinal Mazaran, sabi niya, let us look at let's look at it from another place. Instead of beggaring thy neighbor, let us look at this as how will it benefit our neighbor? How will our economic policies also benefit our neighbor? So everybody prospers, a real family of nations. And number two, the other principle there in the Treaty of Westphalia is that let no other treaties superimpose themselves and back tayo sa and which will lead to a backslide into empire again. Now, this effectively stopped the war. Now, there were nations that wanted to continue the wars kasi malakas sila, as we find today, no? But that principle, umiral yan, and that started the drive towards which led to the formation, we would argue, of the American nation, the Republic, the United States, which was epitomized in the policies of the first Treasury Secretary of the United States in 1776, Alexander Hamilton. And Hamilton advocated for a very protectionist policy. And Hamilton also said we need to, what they call infrastructure now, he termed internal improvements. This is the report on the manufacturers, which our esteemed co-hosts know this very well. So it after the War of Independence against Great Britain, who wanted a globalist free trade type of system, they battled against this and they won. And they said, we have to change the world financial system. But instead of importing a lot of goods from other countries, they said, no, we will develop our industries internally and then set tariffs on these other countries to protect our own industries, to protect the jobs, to increase our production and manufacturing, and thereby increase the income and the status and the general welfare of their own citizens. This was followed again, maybe 80 years later, by Lincoln. Lincoln was Abraham Lincoln, who came into office 1861, had also this kind of thinking. He was Hamiltonian in his thinking and saying, we were ruined by what we call, quote unquote, British free trade at the time. So he was also quoted by saying, if you want to use British steel, you will have to sell your children, because that's how expensive the tariff we will put it on British steel. So he was against this free trade also. And you can see the numbers, and we can provide later on the articles from the LaRouche organization at the time, saying that the British, the steel production, since the protectionist policies of Lincoln were implemented, they increased the manufacture of steel by 2,000% in America. Shortly after that, even if Lincoln was assassinated by a network of these, what we call deep state now, but it's the same kind of networks pushing free trade, primarily pushed by the British at the time. They still built through Lincoln networks. They were still able to help nations develop. Primarily, the effects of which were the major restoration of Japan, and even in Germany during the Bismarck years. And Bismarck in Germany quoted later on in the 1900s, sabi niya, we should look at America instead of being in debt and instead of suffering and their citizens suffering after a devastating civil war. They grew even to become one of the leading world powers in terms of manufacturing, production, and all goods by all measures. And the speech of William McKinley, who was also assassinated in 1901, I think, he was a very protectionist president. And he made sure, said, by all measure, and I'm paraphrasing here, by all measure, and by all statistics, the United States is number one, eclipsing the British, who at that time touted themselves as number one in manufacturing, but through free trade. Sabi niya, we didn't build the America through free trade. We built it through protectionist measures and internal improvements, which is Hamiltonian. Okay. The other guy after McKinley is, of course, FDR, Franklin Delano Roosevelt, who went against the speculative bankers and issued and in fact jailed the JP Morgan banker for undermining the US development. He also was instrumental in 1936, I think, of the Glass-Steagall Act, which separated banking, speculative banking, and predatory banking from the economic activities of the nation. Now, all of these people, later on si JFK. Now, one common strain in all of these US presidents were that if you look at the names, many were assassinated, several were assassinated, Lincoln, McKinley, and JFK, and the others may maraming assassination attempt. One would argue that Hamilton was assassinated also by a British agent named Aaron Burr, who challenged him to a duel and aimed for his heart, which is not supposed to be done at that time. Parang duel is just a method to show you to settle disputes, but instead he killed him. So one can argue with that. But in any kind of intention or in any effort by any leader to change the policies, to change the system and all, you will get a pushback from those who benefited from the current system. At the time, it was the British. This time, we are seeing a similar tone. Now, I want to also, I will maybe reserve comment on what Trump is doing now, but suffice to say, Trump has shown a tendency to be similar to all the names I've mentioned in American history. He is moving to protect his own nation. And moving for, when you say reciprocal tariffs, Trump is not going to take advantage of another nation, but he is instead saying, and he said this in many forums and in many talks, na, look, they're taking advantage of us. I'm moving to make balance the game. And this is my job as president. And this is why we, the American people, voted him. Now, on the onset, there's nothing wrong with that because he is moving like any leader, like Putin would or Xi Jinping would, to protect their own citizens and their own nations. Now, Trump is doing the same thing. This is our opinion. And he said, Americans are losing jobs to quote unquote this free trade thing. All of these North American free trade agreements with Canada and Mexico and American might, American manufacturing, agricultural production, and everything else has been deliberately brought down. In the 1990s, our friend Mike Billington did a lot of interviews here. And he said, there was an article that came out. I'm not sure if it's Richie Freeman who put it out from the LaRouche Group and said the U.S. has become the importer of last resort. Meaning the U.S., everybody, the whole world was dumping their goods on the U.S. And because the dollar was strong, the U.S. had to buy this. Now, the reaction of, and if this was true, which we believe it was true, this whole system, this whole Western British banking system has been proven to not be sustainable because it does not prosper their neighbors, it beggars their neighbor. And may hangganan po yan. And this is what we're seeing now. We've seen it in the 2008. We've seen it in before that in 1998, also Asian financial crisis. And the speculators have taken over the whole system. And that's why there was a move by China and Russia and India to form BRICS, because it was a reaction to this kind of system. Now, what's happening now is a reaction of Trump against this same system that has impoverished them. Now, he has said also cabinet meeting just the other day, sabi niya, he's always said that he respects Putin as a smart guy, and therefore he will try to move for peace in Europe. Ang nagreklamo ay yung mga EU countries, European Union heads who were not voted into office, right? And the British. They have always been historically against any move by any sovereign nation state to develop on their own terms. Gusto nila kasama sila. They, not too long ago, they were moving against China. And the same thing. And China looked inward and developed their own industries on their own. And one can argue that they did not develop via free trade. So in that sense, it's the same principle. The other thing also is in his cabinet meeting, Trump said, no, we will be meeting with Xi, and I respect him he loves his nation and he built his nation. So me and Xi and Putin will work together to figure things out, how to build this nation again. But again, as president of the US, his reactions against BRICS, who have said that they will move away from the dollar, his job as Trump is to say, no, I have to protect the dollar and the dollar's dominance. Now, can they? I am confident, and it remains to be seen, but I am confident, as opposed to Biden, Bush, Obama, Clinton, etc. Trump, while he puts his house in order internally, there are forces that are against that. Primarily, itong si Britain. Now, si Starmer is there in the US now to convince Trump not to push through with the peace process with Putin and Russia. Historically, Britain has always been the likes to throw monkey wrench in all your plans. So nanggugulo siya. This happened in 2014. This happened in 2022, which Putin said meron silang peace deal na negotiate already with Ukraine. There was a deal on the table, and then last minute, si Boris Johnson came in and scuttled the whole process. So it's obvious that the freakouts within the US and outside, with all the globalist networks and the bankers, are all freaking out because Trump has demonstrated the qualities more closely to a Hamilton, a Lincoln, and an FDR, to not be a slave to the current system and to change things. And I think pretty soon China and Russia will also agree with him in principle. I think a summit of the three should be useful. Include India na rin. So these are the four powers in the world. And I think moving forward, that should be. So I want to also, later on siguro we can discuss what it means for the Philippines. But I think for the Philippines, we have a golden opportunity now to use this to examine our foreign policy, to look at each nation as a trading partner, to look at all nations as potential to help build ourselves, not through free trade, but to help us through our protectionism. We have to protect and build our own capabilities as a nation. We've been saying this for so long. There is a provision in the Constitution, Article 12, which can be used to take back our industries. There is examples around the world that we can use, like the Westphalia, Treaty of Westphalia, to be a neutral but active participant in the development of all nations. There is room for growth for everybody, where one nation is not taking advantage of another, selling cheap goods, flooding the market with cheap goods, and making us a consumer nation. So that's all. I'll leave it at that, but I wanted to also just go through 4 slides, if you will indulge me, Kamentong. Just 4 slides of of Henry Carey, our friend during Lincoln's time. So in 1852, sige, Ver, you can put that out. In 1852, Henry Carey's book, Henry Carey wrote Harmony of Interests, in which he elaborates a difference between American system and British interest. Note that 1852 kasi, merong mga push. This is before Lincoln came in, about 10 years before Lincoln came in. And this one, there was a push by the free traders, the bankers, to stop the American system, which is a Hamiltonian system. And they wanted open trade na naman. Walang tariffs, walang wag na kayo pumunta doon. They will have cheap goods, you will have British goods which they were importing from India and around the world and China. So there was a push for this. But Henry Carey was a staunch advocate of the American system. So I will read some passages from that, and maybe we can be guided also by these things, how the US was born. So this is from the Harmony of Interest. The slide number 1. Two systems are before the world. One looks to increasing the proportion of persons and of capital engaged in trade and transportation, and therefore to diminishing the proportion engaged in producing commodities with which to trade, which necessarily diminished return to the labor of all. The other, which is the American system, looks to increasing the proportion engaged in the work of production and diminishing that engaged in trade and transportation, with an increased return to all, giving the laborer good wages and to the owner of capital good his profits. One looks to increasing the quantity of raw materials to be exported and diminishing the inducements to the import of men, thus impoverishing both farmer and planter by throwing on them the burden of freight, while the other looks to increasing the import of men and diminishing the export of raw materials, thereby enriching both planter and farmer by relieving them for their payment of freight. One looks to compelling the farmers and planters of the Union to continue their contributions for the support of fleets and armies, the paupers, the nobles, and the sovereigns of Europe. The other, the American system, is to enabling ourselves to apply the same means to the moral and intellectual improvement of the sovereigns of America. One looks to the continuance of that bastard freedom of trade, which denies the principle of protection, yet doles it out as revenue duties. The other to extending the area of legitimate free trade by the establishment of perfect protection, followed by the annexation of individuals and communities, and ultimately the abolition of custom houses. So these are the four slides I wanted to put out. I'll leave it at that, and I'll throw it back to you, Kamentong and Kaado. Thank you for having us here again, and greetings to everybody attending this forum. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Carlos Valdes, Itos, as he is called by friends and comrades. I too was exposed to the LaRouche movement's economic philosophy, what they call the American system of economics. But another name for it is mercantilism. The protection of the domestic industry, promotion of domestic industrialization, and so on. And of course, that is encouraged for every country to do until it reaches a point where it transitions from national economic nationalism to imperialism. So when nation states become developed to a point where it comes in conflict with the similar nation-centric development, it elevates itself to the level of imperialism. That is why we had the conflict in the Second World War, when imperialism of the United States. By the way, McKinley also transitioned from their domestic industrialization to imperialism. That is why McKinley launched the occupation of Cuba and the Philippines. The occupation of the Philippines was to penetrate the Asian market, use it as a base for competing in the China market at that time. So that is where many of the major industrial powers today is transitioning from just national to the stage of imperialism, which is being avoided so far with the philosophy of multipolarism in trade. So from mercantilism, the choice is to move on to imperialism and imperial wars, which the collective West continues to pursue. That is why they were pursuing the Ukraine war to pressure Russia and maybe instigate a collapse and a regime change there, to shift focus to Asia, and from containment of the rising China to a subjugation of China eventually. So we're at that stage, and this complexity, we are happy Ethos gave us the opportunity to explain. And that is why China has continued to extend its open arms to all nations, including the United States of America, to help develop this open trading economy, or the new globalization that I call, as well as maybe also called as the multipolarism. So Ethos brought us to this level of discussion of the complexity of the economic situation, global situation today. So that is what I have to add, and that is why we have this session today, to bring to fore the way to avoid the next war for mercantilism, and to resolve it through cooperation of all nations in the multipolar world. I don't know if others have to add anything. And then I go back to Ethos. Ethos, what's your reaction? Ethos, are you there?
Yes, still here, Kamentong. Sorry, I was, what was reaction to?
Yeah. Well, I explained first of all that I am also exposed to the Larousse movement's economic philosophy, history, the advocacy of protectionism. That is all well taken and understood. But another name for all that is mercantilism, no? And it reaches a complex point where protection of one's national economy and protection of one's own market goes up to the next higher level, which is imperialism, where there's competition for the international markets, and that leads to war, as it happened in the Second World War. Well, of course, I also mentioned that McKinley started the Imperial American quest by occupying Cuba and then eventually the Philippines, in order to have a foothold in Asia as a base for to compete in the China market at the time, where the rest of the Western economies also were exploiting.
Yeah.
So we're at that stage where the danger of this imperialist stage and the wars it brings is facing humanity. Well, as you explained, even Trump is aware of this without saying so, and is adjusting to it, extending possible cooperation with Russia and China, with Putin and President Xi Jinping, through collaborative efforts. But at the same time, there is also the other direction that we can see from the American pressures and the collective West, including in Europe, the continuing pressure to pursue the Ukraine war. And we can see just the past few weeks, the deployment of the French aircraft carrier shelves to go into the Asian region and exercising military drills with the Philippine Armed Forces and so on. So these two trends are going on, and I think the Philippines should take a decisive role in directing it towards the right path, and which is the resolution through global cooperation. Your any addition from?
No,
No.
I agree. I agree, Kamentong. Definitely the Philippines, if we were going to look at given everything that's happening in the world, given Trump's first position, which is he's a very shrewd businessman, but he's never given respect. He's never said anything bad about Xi Jinping and Putin. All he said, he's always said, even in his first term, that these guys are very smart. So you have to deal with them on their terms. But they love their country. They're moving to protect their country, and I understand that. I would also submit that, remember when Trump, 2017, after he got elected, went to the World Economic Forum and he said the future does not belong to globalists, it belongs to patriots in all countries. We need a strong Russia, we need a strong China, we need strong nations like that. And I will move to make my country strong. MAGA nga, di ba? Make America Great Again, yung kanyang slogan. And I think the American people have responded overwhelmingly. That said, the Philippines this policy of this government is obviously misguided, and whether it's deliberate or not, they're listening to the wrong people. Remember, during former President Duterte's time, Trump never gave him grief about dealing with China. You know, pinabayaan niya. You want to deal with China, you want to do this, my dealing with you is between you and me. Trump also never escalated any armed conflict in all. In fact, the Abraham Accord showed that he is willing to enable to promote global peace. So given his track record, and right now he's moving to end the Gaza conflict. Now it's not as easy as overnight, because he has to deal with the world, the systems, and the deep state, not just in the US, but the deep state all over the world, including here in the Philippines. Parang alam na natin kung sino-sino yung mga yon lumalabas. Just as an aside, those who scream the loudest are the most guilty. So that's not my quote. I'm quoting from somebody. So when Trump said we will audit the US aid, for example, yung pinakamaingay dyan, alam na natin, yung mga kaibigan natin sa media and yung mga ibang business interests who have been benefiting from this largesse for a decade plus, or even since the 50s. That is being purged. That is being audited now. That's why we're seeing all of these reactions. It's a process, but it's, in a sense, we can say it's a war. They are fighting this. They're upending the global economic order led by this guy Trump, which is the same thing that Lincoln did, which is the same thing that the US did under Alexander Hamilton and Washington, which is the same thing JFK wanted to do, which FDR did. And the reaction to FDR's election, the direct reaction of FDR's election in 1932, right after the Great Depression, was for these bankers and this deep state to wage war. And the bankers, alam na natin in history, the bankers have always supported a guy like strong men. So they supported yung grandfather ni George Bush, supported Hitler and Hitler's rise and the Nazi movement. So all of that is interconnected. And if you go back to history even further, the bankers have always, the British bankers primarily, and the free traders and the slave traders have always been against this drive for protectionism in industry. Throughout history, ganun ang labanan. When China moved to stop British free trade in the early 18th century, they were war was brought upon them. 2 opium wars. Why? Because Britain wanted to push drugs. Now China stopped it, but their technology and their weapons were no match for the British. So talo sila. And the European nations took advantage of that. And we see that in Shanghai and all of those things with the foreign quarter and all. That's what started that. So British free trade, and the reason that the British gave of waging war against China was because you're stopping free trade. And that's easily researched. I'm not paraphrasing. You can look that up. Look for the Trade War Secretary of Britain during the Victorian era, I think. They said that because of your stopping free trade, we will wage war on you. And natalo yung China na nakuha yung Hong Kong. And Hong Kong, and shortly after, the first drug bank was established, Hong Kong Shanghai Banking Corporation. And one would argue, with everything, the news and the penalties of U.S. Congress, that they're still continuing to be the bank of choice of these cartels, drug cartels. So this is the kind of thing that I think Trump is up against. He has, whether he's successful or not, we don't know. The problem is now, what we have now in the Philippines, we think we have very weak leadership. And because they hinge their whole success on the deep state, which includes the Biden forces. Now, I'm not saying, I'm just putting it in context na kasi Biden. The thing to do is as if a president were to come in and a new leadership emerge, first, we must impose Article 12. We must implement that to get control over our runaway utility costs, Meralco, the electricity, and then go into a massive energy production. Because once you bring down electricity, you bring down the power cost, everything else follows. But you need a leader who will do that and understands this whole process. And I think given the trend of the Xi, Putin, and even Trump, they will support that. Because it is in their interest to have a strong ally in the Philippines. And an ally not against another nation, but ally in terms of economics and understanding these whole processes. Yun lang yung reaction ko, Kamentong.
Yes, I'd like to add, Itos, the aspect that brings together the LaRouche movement advocacies with China's Belt and Road Initiative. Now, tayo'y tumutungo dun sa talakayan ng physical economy versus the financialized economy that really destroyed America's industrial capacity. But that's another level. We have only 30 minutes to go, but so, yung tinutukoy ng Land Bridge Project po na advocacy ng LaRouche Movement and Lyndon LaRouche is the construction of an international road system, not literally road, but communications and linkages system to develop the global economy. This is similar to the advocacy of China of the Belt and Road Initiative. This is what makes the open trade system work with more balance and fairness, because China, naturally, of course, it also serves its interest of finding an outlet for its excess production by building roads, bridges, transportation, telecommunication in the developing countries, which help boost the production of these countries and boost their economies, boost their incomes to consume production from China and other countries, while they produce more to export to China and other markets. No? So that's the logic behind this. So maybe I'm going to ask Itos just to briefly expound on the land bridge vision of the LaRouche movement.
Sean, no? Muted.
Yung land bridge,
Yes. Just a reaction na komento on your ano. I fully support China's vision of connecting the world through rail. Because that rail again is the most important. And right now, I am in awe and I am impressed. We have always been impressed with China's infrastructure growth. Right now, the high-speed rail network of China, in terms of kilometers, is much more than even the whole world's combined. And the fact that they're able to build cities out of nowhere and populate them and feed their whole nations is nothing short of a miracle that will be written in the history books. And rightly so, China should be proud. They become the manufacturing power of the world. From someone who is the manufacturer, the cheap labor producer, they learned over a couple of one generation. And later on now, they are the ones flooding the world with their products, which are good products. It's not anymore China-made products. There still are because of the massive capabilities of production and manufacturing in China. And their issue now, remember, I would ask our friends in China, maybe the leadership, should be very careful of what they go into now, because there are influences, and I would say, namely the British bankers and the speculators. The reason the United States was drawn into this speculative and financial products instead of manufacturing and strayed from their original vision was because they put in leadership and influencers in the US that are favoring these speculative economies. Instead of the Hamiltonian, naging Adam Smith British. And who are the ones who will benefit from that? Are the bankers. Ika nga ni Henry Carey, the traders and the shipping, not the producers. So it's a cautionary tale for China to if they jump into that or they're influenced by these quote-unquote globalists. Open trade is good, but again, with perfect protectionism, which China has been practicing. So they do not let in just any foreign company. There's a lot of hoops they have to jump through because China wants to protect their domestic economy, which is perfectly the way it should be. Same thing with us, the Philippines. Now we've gone too far behind, but we can and if we're going to build a nationwide railway project, China should be our number one partner in this, because China is the most advanced when it comes to rail building. So one day, maybe if one of our leader comes to fore for the Philippines, you can enter into agreements with China, long-term agreements, 25 years. That is not naman lugi yung Pilipinas, lugi yung China, but in the spirit of mutual beneficial agreements. And I think that's possible.
yeah, Kaado has something to add. Go ahead.
Well, I support the prognosis of Itos regarding Article 12. And this is not a rather new agenda. This is the agenda of Ferdinand Edrelin Marcos Sr., where he nationalized the industries and the utilities to give birth to fuel 11 industrial projects that will create products that we can trade worldwide. And I think if Bongbong Marcos will just read my book, The Power of Poverty, he will find out that I outlined there the very requirements for this, which I was hoping he would adopt the vision of his father. And if he did, added to the continuation of the Duterte International independent foreign policy, would have made us right smack into the center of this multipolarization in which llamado tayo. Kasama tayo ng mga llamado. Hindi tayo kasama ng mga talunan na katulad ng mga Ukrainians. Hindi tayo kasama ng mga natatalo at palubog, the descending power that the US. Now, Trump is applying some of these brakes to the decline of his own country. And it seems that even with that, this president is not taking cue, and in fact is still bound by his mentor, Joe Biden, into weaponizing the government against its own people. So this is a wake-up call. This forum is a wake-up call for this. Read my book, Mr. President. It was forecast that you would have been the new phoenix, the rising phoenix of the Philippine situation. But where have you brought us? You have brought us to near mendicancy. You have brought 63% of our people to perceiving themselves as poor. Galit ka ba sa mga Pilipino dahil sinipa kayo ng EDSA Revolution papunta sa Hawaii? Hindi po kami ang gumawa noon. Hindi po taong bayan. Ang mga Amerikano po kung saan ka nakasuso ngayon. So just as Jeffrey Sachs addressed the Europeans, we are now bringing it to your attention for your consideration. And hopefully, it will reach you in the loneliness of Malacanang, and you will have a renaissance or a rebirth because wala na po kayong masyadong panahon. Lampas na po ang 2.5 taon ng inyong termino. No? And I don't think without a major paradigm shift, no, which you were looking for more than a year ago, you were looking for a paradigm shift. But we don't know what happened. It seems nandun po kayo sa you are in a groundhog day. Parang ganun ang aking metaphor dito sa presidenteng to. Every day is a groundhog day.
Okay. So, narinig po natin kay Ginoong Itos Valdes na importansya ng railway system. At narinig natin kay Kaado kanina yung review niya ng mga railroad systems na nawala po sa atin dahil sa paglalayo ng Pilipinas sa China. Mindanao Railway, Bicol Railway, North Luzon Railway, Luzon Economic Corridor Railway. Lahat zero ngayon. Where is Bongbong Marcos bringing this country to in its alliance with the United States of America?
That is the challenge now kay Secretary Dizon. If he can find a financier other than China.
That's not going to happen. But anyway, let's go back to Ginoong Carlos Itos Valdes. Itos, your final message sa ating discussion dito?
Yes, first of all, thank you for inviting me. I had a good time. Good to see old friends. Kado and Kamentong, my father would be very happy to see these discussions continuing. And to our friends who are attending now, hopefully you can still support Kamentong and his advocacies. And to our Philippines, no, we have our constitution that that can help us put us back on the right track. We just have to have the political will and leaders who understand what is needed to put the Philippines back on track. It's been done before, and there are forces now in the world that will support us should we decide to do this. So hopefully the Filipinos will wake up, read, research, look at our history and the history of the world to have the proper context. But thank you again to everybody. Please continue to support the Asian Century Strategic Studies headed by Kamentong, and hope to see you all again. Good afternoon. Good morning.
Maraming salamat, Ginoong Itos Valdes, and
Thank you.
we'll start our closing now, but let us go to our audience if there are any questions, any commentaries to contribute. While we're waiting, we'll go to Kaado for some closing remarks. Kaado?
Yeah, once again, we thank you so much, our dear listeners at lahat kayo sumusubaybay dito sa Asian Century Philippines Forum. Nakita nyo naman na wala akong spare time dito. No? We always would want to look into the future and sift the weeds out of the wheat para mas lalo niyong maintindihan, hindi lamang yung mga problema bumabagabag sa ating lipunan ngayon, kung hindi kung ano ang magandang mga solusyon para sa mga pang-araw-araw nating problema. Maraming salamat po.
Okay, at wala pa pong kamay na nakataas, kaya ako magpapatuloy po ng ating last closing remarks. Ang ating layunin po dito sa ating mga diskusyon sa Asian Century Philippines Strategic Studies ay palawakin at palaliman ang ating pagkakaunawa ng mga pangyayari sa mundo po natin sa kasaysayan ng sangkatauhan. Ating malaking hamon po yung paghahadlang po ng mainstream media. Talagang ito ay pinakamalaking pader ng oligarkyo sa kaisipan ng sambayanan. Today we discussed such issues such as the Hamiltonian system of economics. We discussed the mercantilist economics, protectionism, imperialism, and so on. We discussed aspects of the physical economy, the concept of physical economy, of which the railway system advocacy is part. So many things that we still have to bring to our nation and to analyze and discuss. But for this event today, we will be closing, and we thank everybody for your time and participation, especially our provincial reactors. We will have more of them in the coming sessions of ours. Pupunuin po natin ang mga major cities ng probinsya po ang ating mga diskusyon. So with that, I think we can close. Maraming salamat po, and we can now say have a good day to all, have a good week ahead of you, and we'll see you in our next